Right now, somewhere in your kitchen cabinet, there's a white powder sitting there for less than $1 a box, and it might be the reason your tomato plants are small, slow, and disappointing you every single summer. You've used it to bake bread. You've used it to brush your teeth. You've probably used it to make your fridge stop smelling like last week's leftovers. And this entire time, it's been sitting 6 feet from your garden, doing nothing, while your tomatoes struggled underground for something it could have fixed in one afternoon. Stick with me for the next few minutes because I'm going to show you exactly what this powder is, exactly how much to use, and exactly where most people mess it up so bad they actually hurt their plants instead of helping them. I'm also going to show you the one mistake that turns this miracle fix into a plant killer. The exact test you can run in your kitchen sink right now to see if your soil even needs it. And at the very end, I'm going to show you what a treated tomato plant looks like sitting right next to an untreated one after 30 days. It's not subtle. It's not close. One of them looks like it belongs on a farm stand, and the other one looks like it's barely surviving. And I want to be straight with you about something before we go any further. This isn't one of those videos where I string you along for 20 minutes and then hit you with some overpriced product at the end. There's no product. There's no link in the description you need to buy anything from. This is one ingredient already in your house and a method most people are either doing completely wrong or not doing at all. By the time this video is over, you're going to know exactly why your tomatoes have been underperforming, and more importantly, you're going to know exactly how to fix it without spending another $1 at the garden center. Before we get into it, if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right with your garden and still getting mediocre tomatoes, hit that subscribe button now, because this channel is built for people exactly like you. Drop a comment and tell me how many tomato plants you've got going this year. I read every single one, and I want to know what you're working with. Let's start with what this powder actually is, because I'm not going to make you sit through 20 minutes of buildup for a plot twist you can Google in 10 seconds. It's baking soda. Plain, ordinary, sodium bicarbonate baking soda. The same box sitting in your pantry right now. And before you roll your eyes and think this is some overhyped kitchen hack, understand this. Baking soda works on tomatoes for a very specific, very real reason. And once you understand that reason, you're going to look at the rest of your garden completely differently. Here's the short version, and then we're going to go deep into the why, because the why is what's going to save your plants from disaster later in this video. Tomatoes are sensitive to acidity. Most home garden soil, especially if you've been composting with coffee grounds, pine needles, or heavy mulch, drifts more acidic over time than tomatoes actually like. When soil gets too acidic, tomato roots physically cannot pull certain nutrients out of the ground, even if those nutrients are sitting right there. Baking soda, used the right way, nudges that soil pH back toward the sweet spot where tomato roots can actually do their job. That's the whole secret. It's not magic, it's chemistry. But the results look like magic when you see them. Now here's where I need you to slow down and actually pay attention, because this next part is the difference between doubling your harvest and killing your plants by the 4th of July. Before you dump a single spoonful of baking soda into your garden, you need to know if your soil actually needs it. Because if your soil is already close to neutral, or worse, already alkaline, adding baking soda is going to push it in the wrong direction, and you're going to do more damage than good. You do not need an expensive soil test kit for this. You do not need to mail a sample off and wait 3 weeks for a lab result. You can do this in your kitchen sink in about 90 seconds. Grab a small cup of soil from about 4 inches down, right where your tomato roots actually live, not the dry surface dirt. Split it into 2 small piles. On the first pile, pour a little white vinegar. If it fizzes and bubbles right away, that soil already leans alkaline, and you need to be very careful about how much baking soda you use, if you use it at all. On the second pile, add a splash of water until it's muddy. Then sprinkle baking soda on top. If that one fizzes instead, your soil is acidic, and that's exactly the situation where baking soda is going to help you the most. Most backyard tomato growers skip this step completely. They see a video, they get excited, and they just start dumping powder on their plants without checking anything first. That's the #1 reason people try this and it doesn't work, or worse, it backfires. You are not going to make that mistake because you just did the test in under 2 minutes and now you actually know what you're working with. So let's say your soil came back acidic, which statistically, if you're in most parts of the country, it probably did. Now you're excited. Now you want results. And this is exactly the moment where I need to stop you, because this is where things get dangerous if you rush it. Baking soda is sodium bicarbonate. The key word there is sodium, salt. And salt in large quantities is one of the fastest ways to destroy a root system. This is not a more is better situation. This is the opposite. A small, correct amount wakes your soil up and helps your roots breathe. Too much, and you are essentially pouring salt directly onto delicate root hairs, and those roots will start to shrivel, brown, and die within days. I've seen people burn out an entire raised bed because they thought if a teaspoon works, a cup must work better. It doesn't work like that with tomatoes, and it never will. Here's the exact amount, and I want you to actually remember this number because it's the one people get wrong more than anything else in this entire process. Half a teaspoon of baking soda dissolved completely into 1 gallon of water applied around the base of one mature tomato plant, no more than once every 2 to 3 weeks. That's it. That's the whole dosage. Not a tablespoon, not a heaping scoop. Half a teaspoon per gallon per plant, and you space it out. If you've got a smaller, younger transplant, cut that in half again. Baby roots are even more sensitive, and there's no reason to rush this on a plant that's still establishing itself. I've talked to growers who learned this the hard way. One guy in a gardening group I follow got excited after hearing baking soda could help his tomatoes. Skipped the soil test completely and just started sprinkling it straight from the box onto 4 different plants every few days because he figured more attention meant faster results. Within a week and a half, his lower leaves had gone crispy and brown at the edges. His soil had a faint white crust forming on top after watering, and 2 of his 4 plants never really recovered that season. That's not a rare story. That's the single most common way this method goes wrong, and it's completely avoidable once you know the actual numbers instead of guessing. Now, should you apply it dry, straight out of the box onto the soil, or mixed into water like I just described? This matters more than people realize. Dry baking soda sprinkled directly onto soil sits in concentrated pockets. It doesn't spread evenly, and when it rains or you water normally, those concentrated pockets can create little salt hotspots right where your roots are trying to grow. Mixing it into a full gallon of water first spreads that sodium out evenly across the root zone instead of dumping it all in one place. It's the difference between a gentle, even nutrient shift and a chemical burn sitting 2 inches from your stem. Always dissolve it first. Always water it in slow, around the base, not directly touching the stem itself. And here's a warning sign to watch for over the next few days after you apply it. If you see the lower leaves on your plant start to yellow at the edges or the soil surface start to look crusty and white, stop immediately. That's sodium buildup, and it means you either used too much or applied it too often. Back off completely for at least 3 weeks and water heavily with plain water to help flush it back out. Most people never see this happen because they follow the half teaspoon rule. But I want you to know the warning signs anyway, because knowing what disaster looks like before it happens is what separates a grower who recovers fast from one who loses the whole plant. Okay, you've tested your soil, you know your dosage, you know how to mix it. But I still haven't told you the actual mechanism happening underground. And this next part is going to change how you think about fertilizing forever. Picture your tomato plant's root system like a set of tiny straws reaching out into the soil, searching for calcium, magnesium, nitrogen, potassium, all the building blocks it needs to grow big, sweet, red fruit. Here's the part almost nobody explains properly. Those nutrients can be sitting right there in the dirt, in plenty of supply, and your roots still can't absorb them if the pH is wrong. It's called nutrient lockout, and it is, without exaggeration, the single most common reason home gardeners fertilize their tomatoes constantly and still get underwhelming results. Think about that for a second. You could be spending real money every season on fertilizer, doing everything the bag tells you to do, and your plant still can't access most of it because the soil chemistry is blocking the door. It's like filling up a pantry with food but keeping it locked, then wondering why everyone in the house is still hungry. Correcting your pH first is what unlocks that pantry. Once the pH sits in that ideal range, somewhere around 6.2 to 6.8 for tomatoes specifically, those straws can finally do their job, and suddenly the fertilizer you were already using starts actually working the way it's supposed to. This is why so many people try baking soda once, see a small improvement, and then stop, thinking it was a fluke. It wasn't a fluke. It was the beginning of a process that needs consistency to really show up in your fruit. I want you to really sit with the nutrient lockout idea for a second, because once it clicks, you'll never look at a bag of fertilizer the same way again. Calcium is a perfect example. Most gardeners who deal with weak, split, or rotting tomatoes assume they just need more calcium, so they buy a calcium supplement, dump it in, and wait. And sometimes nothing changes, and they get frustrated and give up on the whole idea. What almost nobody tells them is that the calcium was probably already there in sufficient amounts. The soil just wouldn't let the roots touch it. That's the frustrating trap so many home growers fall into season after season, spending money treating a symptom while the actual cause sits untouched right under their boots. So how often should you actually be doing this across the whole season, from transplant to first frost? Here's the rhythm that works. Once you've done your initial soil test and confirmed you're dealing with acidic soil, apply your half-teaspoon per gallon mix once every 2 to 3 weeks, starting about 2 weeks after you transplant your seedlings into the ground, not before, because young roots need time to establish first. Continue that rhythm through the early growth stage and right up through flowering. Once your plant is loaded with fruit and actively ripening, you can stretch that out to once a month, because at that stage you're maintaining balance, not correcting a problem anymore. And here's something important. Keep doing your vinegar test every few weeks too. Soil chemistry shifts as the season goes on, especially if you're watering heavily or it's been raining a lot, so don't just set it and forget it. Check in with your soil the same way you'd check in with anything else that's alive and changing. Now, everything I've told you so far has been about what's happening underground, in the roots, in the dirt, where you can't even see it. But there's a second use for this exact same box of baking soda that most people never even think to try, and it's about to solve a completely different problem that's probably already hurting your plants right now, above the soil, on the leaves you look at every single day. Blight. Powdery mildew. If you've grown tomatoes for more than one season, you already know exactly what I'm talking about. That grayish-white, dusty film that shows up on your leaves in the middle of summer humidity. Those dark spots that spread from the bottom of the plant upward until entire branches are curling, yellowing, and dying before your fruit even has a chance to ripen. It is one of the most heartbreaking things in home gardening. Watching a plant that was thriving in June turn into a diseased mess by August, right when you were finally about to get a real harvest. Here's what almost nobody tells you. The same box of baking soda sitting in your kitchen can be turned into a foliar spray that actually helps fight both of those problems. Fungal spores that cause powdery mildew and early blight struggle to survive on a leaf surface where the pH has been shifted even slightly. Baking soda raises that surface pH just enough to make the leaf a hostile environment for fungus to take hold and spread, without harming the leaf tissue itself, as long as you mix it correctly. Here's the mix. 1 tablespoon of baking soda, 1 tablespoon of a light cooking oil or horticultural oil to help it stick to the leaf surface, and a few drops of dish soap to help everything bind together, all mixed into 1 gallon of water. Shake it well, because baking soda and oil do not naturally want to blend, and if it separates in your sprayer, you're not getting even coverage. Spray the tops and undersides of the leaves early in the morning, never in direct afternoon sun, because wet leaves under a hot sun can actually scorch. Do this once a week as a preventative measure once you start seeing that humid, muggy stretch of summer weather roll in, or twice a week if you're already seeing the early dusty spots starting to form. Here's why timing matters so much with this spray specifically. Fungal spores don't wait for you to notice a problem before they start spreading. By the time you can actually see that gray dust on a leaf, the spores have usually already landed on a dozen other leaves nearby that just haven't shown symptoms yet. That's why this works so much better as prevention than as a cure. If you wait until half your plant is already covered, you're playing defense on a fire that's already spreading, and no spray, baking soda or otherwise, is going to undo leaf damage that's already happened. Get ahead of it the moment the weather turns humid, and you're stopping the fire before it ever really starts. This is the part where most videos about garden hacks would wrap up, because you've already gotten 2 completely different, completely legitimate uses out of one 50-cent box of powder. But I told you at the beginning we were going all the way through to the finish line, and there's still one more critical thing you need to know before you go pour this on everything in your yard, because this next mistake is the one that gets the most comments on gardening forums every single summer, right after people ignore it. Not everything in your garden wants this treatment. In fact, some of your plants will actively suffer from it. Tomatoes tolerate a mild pH shift well and actually benefit from it in acidic soil. But blueberries, azaleas, and other acid-loving plants need that lower pH to survive, and dosing them with baking soda is one of the fastest ways to stunt them or kill them outright. If you've got blueberry bushes anywhere near your tomato bed, do not let this spray or soil mix drift over there. And definitely don't reuse the same watering can without rinsing it out first. Peppers and eggplants, which are close cousins to tomatoes in the nightshade family, can generally handle a similar light treatment, but you should still cut the dosage down, especially for peppers, which tend to be a little more sensitive to sodium buildup in the soil than tomatoes are. And here's one people really don't expect. Be careful with container-grown plants of any kind. Pots don't have the natural drainage and dilution that ground soil has, so sodium can build up in a container much faster than it would in an open garden bed. If you're growing tomatoes in containers, cut your dosage down and stretch your timeline out even further, because that salt has nowhere to go except deeper into a small enclosed space right where your roots are. Here's a simple rule that covers almost every situation you'll run into. If a plant naturally thrives in acidic conditions, in the wild or in a garden bed, baking soda is working against its biology, not with it. If a plant tolerates a more neutral to slightly alkaline environment like tomatoes do, you're working with its biology instead of against it. When in doubt about a plant you're not sure about, run that same quick vinegar test on the soil around it before you treat it, the same way you tested your tomato bed at the start of this video. It takes less time than reading the label on a bag of fertilizer, and it saves you from guessing with something that's living and can't tell you when it's struggling until the damage is already visible. So now you know what it is, how to test for it, exactly how much to use, how to apply it safely, why it works on a chemical level, how often to repeat it, how to use it to fight disease on your leaves, and which plants to keep it away from. If you've made it this far, you already know more about this one ingredient than most people who've been gardening for 20 years. But I've been saving the best part for last, because this next combination is what actually takes people from "my tomatoes are doing okay" to "my neighbors are asking what I'm doing differently." Baking soda alone gets you a solid improvement, but there are two other things sitting in most kitchens right now that, when paired with it, create a combination that hits your tomatoes from every angle at once. And I mean every angle. Sweetness, fruit strength, and one of the most frustrating tomato problems there is. The first pairing is Epsom salt. Now, I know what you might be thinking. We just spent the last several minutes talking about how too much salt destroys roots. So why am I telling you to add more salt into the mix? Here's the distinction that matters. Epsom salt isn't sodium. It's magnesium sulfate, a completely different mineral that tomatoes crave specifically because magnesium is a core building block for chlorophyll production, which is what drives photosynthesis, which is what drives sugar production in your fruit. More available magnesium generally means a plant that's producing energy more efficiently, which shows up as noticeably sweeter, more flavorful tomatoes by harvest time, not just bigger ones. Mix 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt into a gallon of water and apply it around the base of your plant about once a month, on a separate week from your baking soda application, not the same day, because you want your roots absorbing one correction at a time rather than getting hit with multiple mineral shifts simultaneously. Think of it like giving your plant a balanced diet across the month instead of one overwhelming meal all at once. The second pairing solves a completely different problem, one that has probably ruined at least one tomato harvest for you already if you've been growing for more than a couple of years: blossom end rot. That ugly, sunken, dark, leathery patch that forms on the bottom of an otherwise perfect tomato right as it's about to ripen, turning what could have been dinner into compost. Blossom end rot isn't caused by a disease or a pest. It's a calcium deficiency issue, almost always made worse by inconsistent watering. And here's the good news. You've probably been throwing away the exact fix every single time you crack an egg. Eggshells are loaded with calcium carbonate. Rinse them out, let them dry completely, and crush them down into a coarse powder, either with a rolling pin or a quick pulse in an old coffee grinder. Work about a half cup of crushed eggshell directly into the soil around each tomato plant at transplant time, and then top it off with another light sprinkle worked into the top few inches of soil once a month through the growing season. That calcium slowly releases into the root zone over time, giving your plant a steady supply exactly where it needs it, right as fruit is forming and most vulnerable to that deficiency. Think about how many eggshells the average household throws straight into the trash or the compost bin every single week without a second thought. That's calcium you already paid for, sitting in your garbage, while your tomato plants are dealing with a calcium shortage 20 feet away in the garden bed. Start a small container on your counter just for rinsed shells, and by the time transplant season rolls around next year, you'll have more free calcium than you know what to do with. It's one of those things that feels almost too simple to actually work, right up until you see a full season without a single sunken, rotted bottom on your tomatoes. Put all three together, and here's your full monthly rhythm across the season. Baking soda soil drench every 2 to 3 weeks for pH correction and nutrient unlocking. Baking soda foliar spray weekly during humid stretches to fight fungal disease on your leaves. Epsom salt drench once a month on its own separate week for sweetness and energy production. Crushed eggshells worked into the soil at transplant and refreshed monthly for calcium and blossom end rot prevention. 4 simple things, most of which are already sitting in your kitchen right now, working together instead of against each other, each one solving a piece of the puzzle the others don't touch. Now let's talk about timeline, because I don't want you standing over your tomato plants after 1 week expecting a miracle, because that's not how any of this works, and I'd rather you know exactly what to expect than get discouraged and quit right before the results actually show up. In the first week to 10 days after your first proper application, you're not going to see dramatically bigger tomatoes yet. What you will start to notice, if you're paying close attention, is the color of your leaves. They tend to deepen, going from a slightly pale or yellowish green to a richer, darker green, which is a sign that nutrient uptake is actually improving. That's your first confirmation that the pH correction is working underground where you can't see it. This is usually the point where people almost quit, right before anything visible happens, because 10 days of darker leaves doesn't feel like the dramatic transformation they were promised. Don't stop here. This is the setup, not the payoff, and the payoff is coming faster than you think. By around the 3 to 4 week mark, assuming you've stuck with the rhythm, this is where you start seeing it in the fruit itself. New tomatoes forming tend to be noticeably larger than the ones that set earlier in the season before you started this process. Existing fruit tends to ripen a little faster and more evenly, without those hard green shoulders near the stem that never seem to turn red. This is also usually around the point where, if blossom end rot has been a recurring issue for you, you'll notice new fruit forming without that sunken dark patch on the bottom. By day 30, and this is the moment I promised you at the very beginning of this video, the difference becomes impossible to miss, even for someone who isn't paying close attention to their garden every single day. Picture 2 tomato plants growing side by side. Same variety, same amount of sunlight, same starting conditions. One of them has gone through this full 30-day process. The other one hasn't been touched. The untreated plant is smaller. Its leaves are a duller, almost yellowish green. Its fruit is still mostly green and hard, sitting there refusing to ripen at a normal pace, maybe even showing the first signs of that dark, sunken rot near the bottom. The treated plant, right next to it, tells a completely different story. It's noticeably taller and fuller, with deep green leaves that actually look glossy under sunlight. It's loaded with fruit in every stage, some just forming, some blushing orange, some fully deep red and ready to pick, hanging heavy enough that the branches are actually starting to sag under the weight. That's not an exaggeration for the sake of a video. That's what nutrient lockout being fixed, combined with disease protection and a steady calcium and magnesium supply, actually looks like in real time, in a real backyard, on a plant that started out exactly as unimpressive as the one sitting right next to it. Slice into a tomato from each plant, and the difference shows up there too. The untreated fruit tends to be thinner-walled, a little watery, with that faint, underripe tang that never quite disappears even after it turns fully red. The treated fruit is denser, holds its shape when you cut it, and carries that deep, sweet flavor that makes people stop mid-bite and ask where you got it from. That flavor difference is the magnesium and the balanced pH doing exactly what we talked about earlier, driving real sugar production instead of just water weight. This is the difference between a tomato you eat because it's there and a tomato you actually look forward to picking. That's the entire process, start to finish. Test your soil in under 2 minutes with vinegar and baking soda before you touch anything. Use half a teaspoon of baking soda per gallon of water, applied around the base every 2 to 3 weeks, never dry, never more concentrated than that. Watch for yellowing edges or crusty white soil as your warning sign to back off. Understand that you're not just adjusting acidity for the sake of it, you're unlocking a pantry of nutrients your plant already has access to but can't reach. Use the same baking soda as a weekly foliar spray during humid weather to keep blight and powdery mildew off your leaves. Keep it away from acid-loving plants like blueberries and go easy on peppers and anything growing in containers. Then layer in Epsom salt for sweetness and crushed eggshells for calcium, and give it 30 days to show you exactly what your garden was capable of the entire time. If this video just changed the way you're going to treat your tomato patch this season, that's exactly why I make these. I'm not interested in fluff or filler. I'm interested in giving you something you can walk outside and actually use today. So do me a favor, hit that like button right now because it genuinely tells me this kind of deep, no-nonsense breakdown is what you want more of. Subscribe if you haven't already because I've got more of these exact kinds of hidden in plain sight garden fixes coming, the stuff nobody else is explaining properly. And drop a comment below telling me if you're going to try the vinegar soil test this week or if you've already tried baking soda before and had it go wrong. Because I guarantee somebody else reading the comments has the exact same question you do. And this community grows stronger every time we help each other out. I'll see you in the next one, and I hope your tomatoes are the ones sagging under the weight of the harvest this year.